What's good, peeps? Thanks as always for passing by the channel. Much appreciated. Hit that subscribe button if you guys are new. All right, so I was asked a very good question on the most recent Q&A. Someone asked me, who is my fighter of the decade up until now? Right, a lot can still change. There are a few months left of this year. Canelo could beat Danny Jacobs on the weekend, then could fight another killer sort of September, October. So he could definitely be the fighter of the decade. But up until now, who is my fighter of the decade? I couldn't answer it because I hadn't even thought about it. I put it out on Twitter. I asked a question to people that follow me on Twitter, and a lot of people came back and said Floyd. Some people said Vladimir Klitschko. Some people said GGG. Some people said Canelo. I whittled it down to 6 that might be in the conversation, right? I do think we have clear favorites in Canelo and Floyd, but I thought we'd offer a few more options just to make it a better discussion. So I've got Canelo, Floyd, Andre Ward, Pac-Man, Loma, and Terence Crawford. I will say this about Pac-Man. I didn't really want to put Pac-Man in there, but I do think he deserves a mention. And the only reason I'm mentioning him is because if this was between 2009 and 2019, as opposed to 2010, 2020, I think Pac-Man would have won. And I really do mean that. I mean, what Pac-Man did just in that 2009, I've got it up here now, just to remind people, that's the period, 2009 is when he beat Ricky Hatton, smoked him. Cotto, which pained me, beat him. And then in 2010 onwards, Clottey, Margarito, Shane Mosley, Marquez. That's a fucking run, you know. Lost to Bradley, which he didn't lose. I remember that fight. Split decision, but he won that fight. Then he got knocked out by Marquez, came back, beat up Rios, beat Bradley, beat Algieri, where I think he put him down like 100 times. Lost to Floyd, came back after that, beat Bradley, beat Vargas, lost to Horn, beat Matisse, and then obviously most recently beat Broner. And obviously has that fight coming up against Keith Thurman. That's a good run. That's a very, very good run. And I think he needs to be in the conversation. But it is difficult to put him in the conversation when you remove 2009 Ricky Hatton and Miguel Cotto, right? I mean, you add those 2 wins in. I mean, that's a ridiculously good run. So I think he deserves to be mentioned, and I think you need to look at the wins and losses a bit more deeper, because regardless of the losses, there are some fantastic wins on that resume, even between 2010 and now. So he's definitely in the conversation. Again, these are guys that I just thought of. I probably have missed someone. I did think about Vladimir Klitschko, and I did think about Kovalev, especially if Kovalev got the win against Andre Ward, but back-to-back losses against Andre Ward made me rule out Kovalev. But there are a few guys I thought of, including GGG as well. By all means, get your names in. Don't just give me number 1 and 2, which I think might be easy. Give me your 6 or 7. All right, let's have a look at Loma. So Loma's record since 2010. He made his debut in 2013. Then he had that fight against Orlando Salido, his second fight for a world title. He lost that on split decision. Remember, Salido came in overweight for that fight, but nonetheless, he still lost. And then after that, he fought Gary Russell Jr. in his next fight for a world title. Gary Russell Jr., an unbeaten Gary Russell Jr. He then had a bit of, I think, an easy run. The next 3 fights were kind of winnable fights that he took on. Then he fought Roman Martinez for the super featherweight belt. So that's another weight class above. Then he fought the Axeman, Nicholas Waters. I don't think a lot of people give him credit for that. Remember, this is the run where he just made people quit, right? So Nicholas Waters, Sosa. He had the fight against Mariaga. A lot of people weren't happy about that because I think Mariaga was coming up in weight. Then he had the fight against Rigo. And it's funny, obviously, looking back now, a lot of people will say, okay, Rigo came up in weight and it was an unfair advantage because Rigo is small, and he is small. Loma's small, Rigo is very small. But when you go back and watch all the tapes, a lot of experts, a lot of people in the know said they thought Rigo was going to win that one. And Loma made him quit. He had that fantastic fight against Linares, an okay fight against Pedraza, and then was very dominant against Crawler, right? He's done all that in what, 14 fights. I think 12 of his fights or 13 of his fights have all been title fights, which is impressive. And we are talking 3 weight classes. So 3 weight classes, 1 defeat, 13 fights. That's impressive. And although I don't think he is the fighter of the decade, his name needs to be in the consideration for it as well. All right, let's have a look at Andre Ward. Not as busy. Of all the fighters on this list, I think in terms of who's been the least active, I think it is Floyd. Obviously, bear in mind he retired in 2000 and what, 15, 16? Came back for that Conor fight, but we won't count that. But Ward hasn't been as busy. But we'll look at his activity since 2010. In 2010, he beat Alan Green, Sakio Bika. That was a tough fight against Bika. Arthur Abraham. Then he had that fight against Carl Froch, right? Going in, I think Ward was favourite, but it was by no means a huge favourite. I think it was more 60-40. But he embarrassed Carl Froch, to be honest with you. Embarrassed. So that's a big name on the resume, as is the 2011 Arthur Abraham. And then he had that fight against Chad Dawson, where Chad Dawson came down, weight drained, but he did get Chad Dawson out of there. Injuries, came back. Edwin Rodriguez, Paul Smith, Barrera, Brand, not great names, but I mean, you have to put them into consideration because of those wins against Kovalev, right? Kovalev was unbeaten at the time, a killer at the time. And although I think the first fight was very, very close, he closed the show in the second fight by stopping him. So he's in there just because of a couple of very big wins, right? I mean, you can go in there because of a couple of very, very big wins. And I think it's fair to say Carl Froch, even Dawson coming down in weight's a big win, but those two back-to-back wins against Kovalev, I think, again, he will be in consideration. All right, let's look at Terence Crawford, the busiest of everyone in this list. I think Terence Crawford since 2010, and that's something like 25 or 26 fights. I'm not going to count all the fights. A freeweight world champion and obviously unbeaten in that run as well. I'm not going to go all the way back to 2010, but I think he started to step it up in 2000. And so we say 2013, Braiders Prescott. Big wins against the likes of Ricky Burns away from home. Embarrassed Ricky Burns. I remember that one. Embarrassed him. And then he's improved on opposition since then. Gamboa, Beltran, Dulorme, Thierry Jean, Hank Lundy, Victor Postal, Molina, Diaz, Indongo, Jeff Horn, Benavidez, and Amir Khan. Solid run. People will look at that list and say there isn't any big standout name, and I have to agree. But nonetheless, it's a good run, it's an unbeaten run, and it's a freeweight world championship run. So you have to give him credit. And although I don't think he is the fight of the decade, I think he does deserve a good mention. All right, let's look at the two favorites, right? These are the two names that everyone's talking about. Let's first look at Floyd. Floyd since 2010. He's run is Shane Mosley. That fight, fucking, I remember that fight. Was it the second round where Shane clocked him twice hard? Then he had that fight against Victor Ortiz, the headbutt incident, and then Floyd hit her in Victor Ortiz after the break. Miguel Cotto, Guerrero, Canelo. What a good win that was. Best performance. One fantastic performance. You had those two back-to-back fights against Marcus Maidana, tough fights. Then you had that big, epic kind of letdown, if you want, against Manny Pacquiao. Not his fault. He was just too good on the night. Then Andre Berto. And again, we're not going to discuss Conor McGregor. See, it's a good run. In fact, it's more than a good run. It's a fantastic run. But there's only 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 fights in that run. I mean, will Floyd get a fight of the decade having 9 fights and only fighting in between half of that decade, right? Because his last real boxing match was 2015. Again, the names are Shane Mosley, Victor Ortiz, Cotto, Guerrero, Canelo, back-to-backs against Maidana, Pacquiao and Berto. Solid run, right? Was he in trouble in any of those fights? Not really. Maidana was a good matchup, right? Canelo was a good matchup. Obviously, one judge gave it a draw and it clearly wasn't. The rest were pretty comfortable. So, well, I say comfortable. Shane Mosley nearly took his head off. But you know what I mean? All right, let's look at Canelo. Canelo, I think, could be my favorite for fight of the decade. I think. Let's have a look at what Canelo has done since 2010. All right, so, okay, so he beat up Miguel Cotto's brother. I remember that one. Carlos Boldemir, Lovemore Indu, Matthew Hatton. That was for the vacant, what was that for? The vacant WBC super welterweight title. Ryan Rhodes, Alfonso Gomez, Kermit Cintron, and then he stepped up. Shane Mosley, Josecito Lopez. That should have been Victor Ortiz. I remember that fight. But Victor Ortiz broke his jaw, I think, against Lopez, right? Austin Trout, Floyd Mayweather, Alfredo Angulo, Lara, Kirkland, Cotto, Khan, Liam Smith, Julio Cesar Chavez, Golovkin, Rocky Fielding, and now Danny Jacobs. That's a fucking run. That's a run, right? That's a decent run. Obviously, there are a few asterisks. Let's not miss out those. I mean, the 2 wins against Gennady Golovkin, people will still question those. The win against Lara, people will question that. The majority decision he got against Floyd, people will question that. But nonetheless, that is a fucking run. That's a run. I'll repeat it again. Boldemir, Ndu, Hatton, Rhodes, Gomez, Cintron, Mosley, Lopez, Trout, Mayweather, Angulo, Lara, Kirkland, Cotto, Khan, Smith, Julio Cesar Chavez, GGG twice, Fielding, and Jacobs. You know what I like about this run as well? What I like about this run is that there are a couple of 50-50s in there, right? Even a couple of fights where he wasn't favourite. He wasn't favourite against Golovkin. It was a 50-50 against Lara. He clearly wasn't favourite against Floyd. There are some fights in there where he's like, he could lose these. He could lose these. And even this Danny Jacobs fight coming up, I mean, he is a favourite, but it's not a big favourite, right? Whereas I look at Floyd, and it's maybe because Floyd is so good, Floyd was favourite to win all those fights comfortably. Even Canelo, right? I know Canelo, I know Floyd was coming up in weight, sorry, it was a catch weight, but even the Canelo fight. I can't give it to Floyd. I mean, the guy fucking quit boxing in 2015. I can't give him fight of the decade. I just can't. So I'm going to go, even though I think the wins against GGG, sorry, the 1 win against GGG was disputed, and so was the draw. I'm going to go with Canelo as fight of the decade. I mean, you're going to add, especially if he beats Danny Jacobs, right? If he beats Danny Jacobs on the weekend, I mean, some good wins in there, some good, legit wins. So I'm going to go for Canelo. What do you guys think? Who is your fight of the decade? Let me know. Peace.